Mom! Mommy! Dad and I ran as fast as we could to the bus stop. I don't believe it. Dad, it's definitely her. We tried to shout over the noise of cars and pushed through the crowd of passers-by. Mom, wait! But she got on a bus and drove away. Mom disappeared a year ago. My parents had a fight and my mother decided to go for a walk. She needed to wind down,
But she never returned home.
the police were powerless, so Dad went to a private detective. We did not hope, but a few months later, he called. My mother was found. The detective left us an address. We immediately rushed there. I was shaking with excitement. I missed her so much. I couldn't believe I was going to see her soon. We got out of the car and saw a luxury house. Wow, maybe we got something wrong. But no, everything matched. This was the house. We hesitated, then knocked on the door. It swung open and... Mommy, I couldn't believe my eyes. I ran to her, but she only greeted me politely and stopped back as if I were a stranger. Then she asked if I were the new neighbors who had bought a house nearby. Neighbors? Mom, what's wrong with you? But she looked at us as if seeing for the first time. We had to say something and Dad lied that yes. We recently moved to this nice area. My mother was delighted and invited us for tea. Inside, the house was even more luxurious. My mother led us into the living room and went into the kitchen. I took out our family photo to show her, but my dad stopped me and whispered to me not to do it. My mother came back with tea and cake. She said that she missed the guests. They rarely had anyone. I didn't know what was going on. It was like an angry prank. Did she hit her head or get sick? She really treated us like strangers. I was on the edge. I'm your daughter, Mom. Suddenly, a man in a police uniform came into the living room. Mom immediately quieted down. Then she caught herself and introduced us to Steve, her boyfriend. What? We couldn't believe it. Steve frowned and whispered something in my mother's ear. Mom apologized to us and immediately left. He was clearly not happy about Dad and me, and while my mother was away, he gave us a real interrogation. Where we live, why we came, we had to get out of it. Dad named a house at random. And Steve wanted to ask something else, but Mom came back and brought him warm slippers. She was clearly very nervous in front of him. Even her hands were shaking, although Mom tried to hide it. Mom handed everyone another piece of pie, and Steve stopped her and told her sternly that it was time for Dad and me to leave because Mom wasn't in a position to receive guests. She needs to take care of herself. All the way home, we thought about what to do and what Steve had in mind. Was Mom pregnant? We didn't know what was wrong with her. It couldn't be worse. Mom lived a different life, but it didn't look like she was crazy. Something must have happened to her memory. We decided to find a specialist to deal with this. We went to a psychologist and he confirmed our concerns. My mother had amnesia. She really forgot us, but the psychologist said that there was hope for recovery. She could be helped. He said to show her the memorabilia. It would awaken her memories of us. The main thing was not to tell the truth directly, otherwise it might hurt her even more. We went to see her again. Dad came up with a cool move to give my mother a blue rose in a pot, the same as on their first date. Mom was happy to see us, but she wouldn't let us in. Steve was home. Nevertheless, my father gave Mom a flower, and I thanked her for the tea and cake. Mom was delighted with the blue color of the rose. She even said she'd seen one like it somewhere. Did she remember something? But then Steve appeared and abruptly asked us to leave. This time, he didn't even greet us. My mother tried to object, but he stopped her roughly. He slammed the door on us. We were walking reluctantly to the car when we heard the door open again. We turned around and saw Steve throw the flower out into the street. Mom was crying, but there was nothing she could do. Dad was about to go back and beat Steve. But I stopped him. We won't get Mom back this way. Don't forget about our plan. I couldn't stop thinking about what I saw. How did she even get in touch with him? She was also pregnant with his child. I took her photo. My mother was beautiful in it. We were in the park that day eating ice cream. The park! We should have called Mom to the park for a walk in her favorite places. Dad said it was a great idea. This was her favorite place in the city. The next morning, we watched the mansion from the car, waiting for Steve to leave for work. Then we immediately rang the doorbell. Mom was happy, but visibly nervous. She said that Steve was very jealous and Dad's gift led to a real scandal. We tried to talk her into going to the park, but she was afraid. Steve called home every hour to make sure she was there. Mom said sadly that she hadn't been out for a long time and was tired of staying at home. My father and I tried to persuade her. We promised that we would be back like Winky. We said we didn't know anyone here but her. She smiled and agreed to walk for half an hour. I was so happy. In the park, we went around all the paths and rides, ate ice cream. Mommy, I hope you remember how happy we were here. Suddenly, Mom pulled my bangs off my face the way she usually did. What if... But then Mother looked at her watch and the change passed over her face. She asked us to take her home immediately. I was a good girl, but she had to go. She had been with us too long. Steve would be angry. What an asshole. Steve had no right to treat her like this. She was not his property. Dad said that Mom couldn't stay with this tyrant. She deserved better. Mom started to make excuses and say that Steve was very worried about her, but it was clear that she was very afraid of this scumbag. He was just a goddamn manipulator. I already reacted for the photo. I wanted to tell my mother as quickly as possible that we were her real family. But then we heard police sirens. Steve arrived. He was furious and shouted that my mother shouldn't have gone out. We had to leave. Dad whispered to Mom to call us when Steve went to work. We would help her escape. Before Mom could respond, Steve grabbed her arm and pulled her into the car. He shouted at us to get away from his family. Otherwise, he would arrest us. Dad was furious how this asshole behaved with my mom. I was shaking all over myself. But there was nothing we could do but wait for my mother to call. What if she didn't call? I tossed and turned all night and couldn't sleep because of these thoughts. But toward morning, the phone rang. Mom, she asked us to come and said Steve wasn't home. So she had decided to leave this asshole after all. We were at her house in a few minutes. The door was ajar. We knocked and heard my mother asking us to come in and wait for her to get ready. But when we were in the living room, we saw police officers in addition to my mother. Before we knew it, we were pinned down. This was horrible. I started to struggle and scream, "No, let us go!" Steve didn't go anywhere. He looked at us and grinned. It turned out that he found the house we were supposedly live. There were other people there, of course. Steve convinced my mother that we were scammers or thieves and asked her to draw us into a trap. It was terrible. My mother averted her eyes and tried not to look at us. I couldn't keep silent any longer. I began to tell my mother that we were not scammers. We were her family, and for some reason, my mother did not remember us. It was hard to speak, and tears were choking me. I wriggled out of the policeman's hands and tried to get the photo out of my bag with trembling hands. I so wanted my mother to see it and believe us. But as soon as I pulled out the photo, the cop pinned me down again, and he put on the handcuffs since I didn't understand on good terms. Heck, our photo! It was gone. I asked the policeman to look for it. But he wouldn't listen. We should have gone to the station. And Mom? Mom didn't even look at us. Like at the bus stop. We tried to explain everything to the police, but they told us that my mother should confirm our words. How? She didn't remember us. We sat in the station for 5 hours. Everything seemed pointless. We were desperate when we heard my mother's voice. She was looking for us, and she had a picture in her hands. Mom, we're here. I ran to her. She said it was all a big mistake. That I was her daughter. She remembered everything. We cried with happiness. When everyone calmed down a little, my mother told us that she remembered us as soon as she saw the photo. Mom tried to explain everything to Steve, but he got mad and locked her in the mansion. She only managed to get out of the back door when he fell asleep. Dad asked her how she was feeling and if the baby was okay. Mom didn't understand what he was talking about at first. And then she laughed out loud. She was not pregnant. The fact was that Steve was paranoid about protecting my mother. She often had migraines and dizziness. And at some point, custody became a tyranny. In fact, he was afraid that she would leave him. We were about to leave when Mom stopped abruptly. She looked startled. Steve was standing in a dark doorway. His eyes were bloodshot. And he was shaking with rage and clenching his fists. We ran forward as fast as we could, but we must not stop. The cannibals have almost caught up with us. The wall that separated the city from the rest of the island was a kilometer away. We have to make it at any cost. Sam and I are journalists, and we came here to do a story about the cannibal city. I was sure it was just a rumor, but now the crowd of savages was almost upon us. In desperation, I turned to the side. There was an abandoned shopping center. Sam followed, still holding the camera. I looked around the room frantically. There was no point in running to the shops. There were no glasses in the windows for a long time, and suddenly I saw an elevator. We ran to it and I pressed the button. The elevator still wasn't moving. I looked around and was horrified to see that the mall had been invaded by a crowd. And then the elevator doors creaked open. Sam and I jumped in, and I pressed the close button. The doors were closing so slowly, and the cannibals were already running towards us. This was the end. I already started going over the images of my life. And why did we just come here? I always wanted to be a well-known journalist, and went head over heels. So when I heard about the Cannibal Island scandal, I realized this was my chance to become famous. The government had enclosed the captured city with a wall, and no one dared to enter it. And I decided. And my obnoxious colleague Sam stuck with me. That's how we ended up in this hellish place. I was startled out of my reverie by one of the savages grabbing my leg. I felt a piercing pain from the fingernails and screamed, but with the last of my strength, I kicked him with my other foot. How painful. He jumped back as the elevator doors finally slammed shut. We made it, Sam. He kicked the button board with all his might, and the elevator blinked. Now the doors couldn't be opened. They were jammed, and we could get out through the hatch into the shaft. We're safe, Sam said. But the beasts continued to pound on the door anyway, and every time they hit the elevator, I flinched. I looked at Sam, and he suddenly turned the camera to my leg. What? I looked down, my head spinning. The whole leg was torn and covered in deep marks. I immediately remembered the long, dirty fingernails of the cannibal that had clung to me, and my heart sank. Before that, probably because of fear, I didn't even feel pain. But now my leg felt like it was burning. Sam took a close-up of it. I almost started to cry, but then Sam hugged me, and he said that the leg would heal up, and we would definitely survive, and there was no way he was going to leave me. I was ashamed for a second, because I thought Sam was a cold, calculating egotist. And now he took care of me. He even tore off the sleeve of his shirt and bandaged my wound. He recorded everything on the camera, and the cannibals continued to break into the door. I didn't know what to do. We couldn't get out while these beasts were watching us, and we couldn't stay here forever either. But there were no other options. We opened their backpacks, stew, water, bars, if anything that was enough for 2 days. And I checked my phone, but of course there was no connection. Sam filmed my every action. The banging on the door only got worse. The cannibals seemed to be losing their temper. I started to panic. Sam suddenly said that when we got out, we'd get fame in the Best Reporter award. After all, we were the first to show unique footage from the island of cannibals. His words calmed me down a little. Yes, I will be the best. I'll surpass everyone who said I wasn't amount to anything. All I had to do was get out. The cannibals were banging harder. I panicked again, so did Sam. We woke up almost in sync. What? Had we fallen asleep? How long did we sleep? Due to stress and fatigue, we just passed out. I could hardly remember what happened before. We listened. There was no more pounding on the door. Had they gone? But before I could be happy, I brushed against my bad leg and felt a sharp pain. My leg was already swollen. Almost crying, I showed Sam my leg, and it only made me feel worse. Sam just turned on the camera and made a stupid joke that I would soon turn into a cannibal. Perfect timing. I urgently needed antibiotics, but there was no first aid kit in my backpack for some reason. Maybe I dropped it during the chase. The only way out was to look for medicines in the shopping center. I knew that in a few hours, I wouldn't be able to stand on my feet. Sam agreed to come with me, but only if I caught it on a GoPro camera. That's not what I needed to think about right now, but I agreed. He put the GoPro on my head, and we listened. Everything was quiet. Sam carefully opened the hatch of the elevator. At the thought that we might run into the cannibals, the blood froze in my veins. Sam helped me out, and soon we were climbing out through the shaft. It was light outside, so we were out all night. I looked around and immediately noticed the sign. Pharmacy. Very close. But before I could take a step, a savage came around a corner and ran towards me, making terrible noises. Sam, back up! He immediately jumped into the shaft and crawled into the elevator. I followed him, and as soon as we had closed the hatch, the savage began to break into it. My heart was pounding and my leg was aching. I began to think that I had an infection. The only way to escape was to get the medicine. I said this to Sam, but he mumbled that he had hit himself hard when he fell into the elevator and now he couldn't walk. Strange, just a minute ago, everything was fine, but I knew that if I didn't get the antibiotic now, I'd be finished. The savage continued to pound on the elevator's hatch. Damn, I need to distract him somehow. I rummaged in my bag and found hairspray. I didn't think it would help me, but I felt the lighter in my pocket, and it hit me. I hope it works. I opened the hatch abruptly. The savage was already hissing and ready to attack. I immediately put the lighter under the spray. A flash of fire burned the cannibal, and he fell screaming into the shaft. Got it! I immediately got out and rushed to the pharmacy alone. When I got there, I immediately hid behind the shelf. I think it worked. No one chased me. There were still some drugs left on the shelves. I noticed the first aid kit on the floor and immediately grabbed it. At that moment, I looked out the window and saw our car. An emergency exit led directly to it from the pharmacy. If we get through the savages, we can get out of here. I just needed to get to Sam. I turned around and was stunned with horror. Right in front of me was a cannibal. I was so excited about the emergency exit that I didn't even hear him approach me. He was a centimeter away from me. But then I grabbed a bottle and hit him on the head. The beast twisted in pain, and I rushed to Sam. I got there quickly. Sam was there, and I breathed a sigh of relief. But then a hand reached out from above. The cannibal. God, I didn't close the hatch. I dropped my backpack and immediately slammed it shut, and tried to hold on with all my strength, but the savage was stronger. Sam, help me, but he was in no hurry. My hands were getting weaker by the second, and I couldn't stand it and let go of the lid. At that moment, the savage who continued to pull it on himself fell into the shaft. That was so close. I looked at Sam reproachfully. Why did he help me? But all Sam said was that he couldn't leave the camera, and that he acted that he had already examined the first aid kit, but it turned out that there were only empty bottles in it. Did I take the wrong box? There was another banging on the elevator door, and I was desperate. Tears welled up in my eyes, but Sam suddenly said I was so brave. Together, we would succeed, because I was the same as him. I was ready to do anything for the sake of a dream. His words cheered me up a little, and I quickly told Sam about the emergency exit at the pharmacy, and he was also very happy. We would get out of there soon. We decided to wait until nightfall, until the cannibals got tired of breaking through and left. To calm down, we told each other stories. Sam was a good conversationalist. However, he filmed on camera even this. But soon the battery was dead, and I hid it in my backpack. Right now, the main thing was to get out of there alive, and we already had a lot of shots. At some point, Sam shushed me. I think it's time. We quickly climbed out through the shaft. My heart was pounding. Sam, hush! Suddenly, shards of glass crunched loudly under my feet. Oh no, they would wake up. Sam and I looked at each other, but the savages were nowhere to be seen. That was close. We tiptoed to the exit, and I tried not to breathe, so as not to make any unnecessary sounds. And then we were out on the street, running as fast as we could to the car. But suddenly, Sam stumbled. As I helped him to his feet, a bottle of antibiotics fell out of his pocket. Stop, but you said the first aid kit was empty. Then Sam's face twisted into a grin. What's happening? He said he just didn't want to give up to me. What? Are you kidding? I might die. But Sam said that was what he wanted. After all, then all the glory would go to him, and I would remain a loser, a missing person, and he wouldn't have to push me into the hands of cannibals. The audience would only see how he tried to help me and bandage my wounds. I was taken aback, not believing his words, but then Sam abruptly snatched the backpack with the camera from me and ran to the car. I quickly picked up the bottle of antibiotics, swallowed the pill as I went, and ran after him. Oh no, Sam! And then he started shouting loudly. I realized with horror that he was waking up the savages. There were a lot of them in the dark and they woke up. Sam climbed into the car and I ran over and tried to handle, but it wouldn't budge. That bastard locked the doors. I was about to be torn to pieces. At that moment, he started the engine. No, it can't end like this. I ran after the cars as fast as I could, and at the last moment, I clung to the trunk. Got it! I struggled to get on top of it, but Sam started maneuvering to throw me off. What are you doing? I held on as best as I could. A pack of cannibals was running behind the car, and at any moment, I could fall right on top of them. But suddenly the car jerked violently. There was a pop. And it stopped. What's happening? I jumped off the trunk and I realized that the tire had burst. I started to panic. I looked back and saw the savages. Furious. They were too close. Limping, I ran to the gate and the wall. Come on, there's not much left. And when I was almost there, it hit me. Where was Sam anyway? I turned and saw that he had got out of the car and was barely dragging himself, and the savages were catching up with him. I wanted so badly to see Sam torn apart after his betrayal. He was ready to give me up for some shots. But then something inside me quivered. It wasn't long ago that I was ready to go head over heels for fame too. I suddenly realized that people could be as good as savages. But no, I'm human. I made an effort and quickly returned to Sam. I took his arm and pulled him along. And all I could think was, if I had really spent my entire life neglecting others for my own purposes, just like Sam. There were only a couple of meters left, and here it was, the exit. We got out on last breath, and I managed to slam the gate shut. At the same moment, the cannibals began to drum wildly on it. Tears welled up in my eyes. We are saved. Is it really over? We went through so much for these shots. But Sam suddenly interrupted me and calmly said that the camera was left in the car. Couldn't believe it. Sam grinned enigmatically. Did you like the video? Then subscribe and like it. Support the channel. Thank you.
Sick? Seriously? I'm sorry, but you have a month or two to live. The doctor continued. Then I started to feel dizzy. The doctor said that I have a severe disease and most often it's transmitted sexually. What if... I stormed out of the room in rage. So I got this piece of trash from my ex-girlfriend? What a stinker! I've been loyal to Susie, and she seems to have been unfaithful to me. With shaking hands, I dialed her number on my cell phone. You broke my life, I shouted. How could you not tell me? Susie said that my suspicions were correct and she had no regrets. You were selfish, so you deserved it, she added, and then hung up. I almost threw the freaking phone at the wall. Screw it, I'm going to get drunk and go to Pete's to celebrate the beginning of my end. Pete is my best friend, but we are different. We both wanted to be actors, but only he managed to survive the finals and I was expelled. Now he's in the theater, and I don't really have a hobby. Pete was glad I came. He likes when we watch stand-up nights together. But this time I had too much and started talking about the illness and Susie. All women are the same, I said. And anyway, if Susie did this to me, why can't I do this to others? Then Peter said I was talking drunken nonsense and that I can't do that. Well, he doesn't understand anything. Besides, he's healthy and successful. We ended up having a fight and Pete blurted out that I'm not his friend anymore. Well, screw you! I went home and immediately passed out. In the morning, the thought of revenge didn't disappear. Well, there's nothing I could do about Susie, but how many other stinkers, right? I will take my revenge on them all. I cleaned myself up and went looking for a victim. You see, I chose a bar for this purpose as it was always full of dissolute girls. That's where I met Susie, by the way. All the girls in the bar, as luck would have it, broke up in pairs. But then I noticed a lone girl behind the counter. She looked just like Susie. After finishing her drink, the girl went to the dance floor and I followed her. I'm Emmett! And you! I shouted, trying to drown out the music. Goodbye, she said, and went to the door. Well, how easy it is to turn someone down when you have your life ahead of you, right? But I won't give up so easily. I snuck outside after her and started following her. We had already walked a block when I hit a tin can. The girl flinched and quickly turned to me. Who's there? Oh, it's you. Are you following me? She frowned. I had to lie that I just wanted to make sure she was safe. Of course. She's happy to see me. She's just hiking up her price, I thought. I offered to go for a walk and to my surprise, she agreed. Yep, I definitely wasn't wrong about her. Along our way, I showed Debbie, that was her name, local stand-up artist performances. Debbie was laughing. She obviously liked me. It's getting cold. Maybe we can continue the date? At my place, perhaps? I suggested. Well, this is where I screwed up. Debbie called me a pervert and then left. What is she, some kind of special? I don't have the time for these games. I might die tomorrow. I caught up with her and joked about it, saying that Debbie could choose her own place for the next date. And suddenly, she called me to the library. Wow! The next day we met there and Debbie gave me a whole literature class. She clearly wanted me to think she was a big brain, but you can't fool me like that. While she was reading, I started hugging her, but Debbie pulled away. You have to be patient, she said. Heck, okay, baby, I will, but I still will bring the matter to an end. When you're walking dead, there's nothing else to lose. The next night, I took Debbie to a nightclub. This is a place where I should have been able to do it. But this time around, she refused both cocktails and dancing. She said that the music was very loud. I didn't like the place either, although Susie loved it. In the end, it didn't work out again. Debbie wanted to go home, so I went to see her off. But what if I still have a chance? We went through the park, and by the pond, Debbie suddenly yelled, "Look! There was a dragonfly sitting on a water lily, and so what? Well, except that even this stupid insect will live longer than I do." But Debbie was happy. She said that dragonflies are her hobby. She kept telling me how much she admired them. They are so hard to catch, almost like true love. She sadly smiled. Debbie admitted that she doesn't usually hang out in bars, and when we met, she went to get drunk because of her ex-boyfriend who cheated on her after 5 years of their relationship. And then I felt uneasy. Deb doesn't seem to be as frivolous as I thought she was. We were saying goodbye at her house when suddenly Debbie looked up and moved closer. She was going to kiss me. I jumped back like I was called it. Debbie didn't understand anything and I just ran away. The next day I called her and tried to justify myself. You know, it was wet in the park. I think I caught a cold. I didn't want to infect you. All she said was that I was very caring. I stayed at home until evening, feeling like a complete scoundrel. Then, suddenly, Debbie showed up. She brought me oranges and throat lozenges, but her attention only made me feel worse. I said I was sleepy and asked her to leave. But Deb kept texting me. I had to answer, even though I was burning with shame. She didn't even know how I lied to her all the time. I felt bad. Debbie suddenly stopped responding. I couldn't get in touch with her for a few days and then all of a sudden she picked up the phone. Deb said she had a cold too and then asked me to bring her medicine. I suddenly got mad. I was about to die. Why should I babysit her? My thirst for revenge seized me again and then I went to Deb's. The door was open and I went inside. Why does it smell so? I went into the living room for a fragrance and saw Deb wearing a makeup and a tight dress. There was a candlelit dinner on the table, and Debbie offered to stay with her. Heck, I went numb. Deb, I can't. Don't ask me why, I said. Debbie was taken aback and sat down. You don't like me anymore? She asked. I didn't know what to say and ran out of her apartment. I just hated myself. After that, I really felt awful. I couldn't leave my bed. I think I'm dying. I need help. And then I remembered Pete. He's my best friend. How could I lose him? He was right. I shouldn't have started this. From day to day, I was getting worse. Even breathing was hard. I decided to make up with Pete one last time. I called him, and he came right away. Surprisingly, Pete forgave me. I must have looked pathetic. He listened to my story and agreed to fulfill my last request, to tell Debbie the whole truth about the illness and tell her I apologize for that. I really couldn't do it myself. And don't dare to tell her where I am, not even on pain of death. Pete agreed, and I was relieved that Debbie would be safe. The next day I got really sick and went to the hospital. I was undergoing an examination when suddenly, Pete actually told her where I was. How did you talk to him into it? I asked Deb. I said I love you, you fool. She replied and hugged me. I didn't want her to see me like this. With a heartache, I asked her to leave me. I saw how hard it was for Debbie too, but she pulled herself together and then left. Finally, the examination was over, and the doctor came to my room with the results. I was preparing for the worst, but the doctor said that the last test was wrong. The lab mixed up the tests and I don't have an infection. But I was almost dying. The doctor said that I might have been nervous. It was due to the effect of autosuggestion. God, I'm healthy. I felt like I was given another chance. I had to go to Debbie's and tell her everything. I ran out of the room, elated, and there suddenly ran into Susie. She had a round belly. What does it all mean? This time Susie explained everything to me. At the time we were dating, she found a great guy and left me for him, and now she's gonna have a baby. What about your diagnosis? I asked. She didn't know what I was talking about. She said that when I called, she thought I was accusing her of cheating. What a fool I was. Screw it. I ran to Debbie's and told her I was well. We can be together, but will she ever forgive me? I hopefully waited for her answer. Finally, she softly said, "We can make a new dinner together." "I'd love to," I said, almost crying. Debbie smiled and I kissed her. Yesterday I was a walking dead who wanted to drag everyone down with him, and today I have a new life. And all of these, thanks to love.
My boyfriend and I were sitting in a restaurant. John gallantly filled my glass and then suddenly pointed the camera at me and lifted the dough. I almost threw up. The plate was crawling with cockroaches. John whispered, "Eat them." I hesitated and couldn't make up my mind. They were moving. And suddenly the woman at the next table, seeing the cockroaches, screamed. We were immediately captured by the guards. I tried to pull away, and John was yelling that I'd ruined a prank. At this rate, I would never save up for my mom's treatment. A lump rose in my throat. After my dad cheated on my mom, she started having heart problems. Now she needed an expensive surgery. I was the only one who could help. I took any part-time job, but it wasn't enough. That all changed when I met John in college. He was the most popular guy in our year. All the girls were crazy about him, but John chose me. We had a relationship like in the movies. Even when John found out about my situation, he did not turn away, but offered to shoot pranks with him. If we became well-known bloggers, money would flow. Since then, we had been constantly shooting for TikTok and YouTube. We wrapped toilet paper around the campus or put rats in the chemistry room. It was terrible, but John kept saying it was all for popularity. In the end, I always agreed with him. Once we even dressed up as homeless people and went to a jewelry store. The seller tried to serve us, but then got angry. We barely got away from the cops, which she called. After this prank, we were massively subscribed to. The audience liked it. Soon I had my first money. But I didn't think it would end up with prison. John was yelling that I'd ruined everything. I shrank back against the wall in fright. He had never treated me like this before. But while we were being driven to the station, John calmed down and then gently stroked my cheek and apologized. I smiled. "It's all right, honey. I understand." We were in the cell for about 5 hours. I couldn't stop thinking about my mother. She probably was worried. But then the door opened and a cop yelled that we'd been bailed out and we were free. Wait, but who did it? The cop said to hurry up. Somebody was waiting for us in the lobby. Looked at each other. We went there and immediately noticed a man in an expensive suit. With a grin, he introduced himself as Buddy. It turned out that he was in the restaurant and saw our prank with cockroaches, and he thought it was funny and brave. But why did he decide to release us? And suddenly Buddy said mysteriously that he had a special offer for us. Can we discuss it over a cup of coffee? He chuckled. I whispered to John that this guy was suspicious, but John had already told Buddy that he agreed to everything. Then he said, "Don't you want to help your mother?" We went to a coffee shop nearby. Buddy gave us an arrogant look that sent a chill down my spine and said he was planning a huge prank. It turned out that he had been following our channel for a long time and realized that we were a perfect match. And what was the prank? Buddy grinned. We were supposed to be at the bank at 6 this evening. Was that all? But he added that it was not that simple. I had to become a dog. What did he mean? Buddy explained I would be in a dog suit and John would lead me to the bank on a leash. I slumped back in my chair. Why would you do that? Then Buddy calmly said that this was just a protest against the ban on coming to the bank with animals. "I'll give you $5,000 each for this." Buddy finished. John's eyes lit up immediately, and I knew he was about to agree. I immediately pulled him back. "John, why don't we talk this out?" We moved aside, and I immediately blurted out that being a dog on a leash was humiliating. It was some kind of slavery and belittled the rights of women, and not a fun joke at all. But then John looked at me in the eye and said it would be alright. With this money, I could cure my mother, and we would have some left for a good life. I got little butterflies in my stomach. Yes, John, you're right, as always. We went to Buddy and said we agreed. He immediately gave us a part of the advance and money to buy a leash and a collar. He also added that we could keep the change. With that, we said our goodbyes. I looked at the money and didn't believe it was true. I suggested to John that we celebrate at my house, but he said he'd better go get the leash. Okay, I'll see you tonight. But as soon as I went home, I immediately felt something was wrong. The apartment was suspiciously quiet. I rushed into the bedroom, where my mom lay motionless on the bed. "Mommy, what's wrong with you?" She said the cops called her and told her about our arrest. It made her feel worse. Mom asked me if I couldn't see John manipulating me. "Because of him, you even stopped communicating with your friends," my mother said. I was getting tired of explaining to her that John was just very worried and forbade to go out without him. I took out the money. "We can have the surgery soon, and it's all thanks to John." Suddenly, Mom turned pale and clutched at her heart. For a second, I froze in horror. God, what have I done? I ran over and took the last pill out of the pack with trembling hands. "Mom, hold on." She swallowed it hard and whispered to me to leave John. He was a dangerous man. I would find out soon enough. I didn't dare protest. All I said was that she needed some new pills, and I would go get them now. I got to the pharmacy quickly, and as I was leaving with the drugs, I suddenly noticed John on the other side of the street. What's he doing here? Then Buddy came to him. They went together to a cafe nearby. Strange. Why would John go out with Buddy without me? I pulled my hood up and followed them in. I need to find out what's going on. They sat down at a table not far from the bar. I quickly sat down at the bar, shaking with tension. I hoped they wouldn't notice me. I listened. Oddly, John spoke to Buddy as if he were an old acquaintance. "This little fool always listens to me and won't guess anything. Today we were going to rob the bank," John said solemnly. "Wait, this is a joke, right?" But Buddy nodded and said that while everyone was staring at my stupid dog costume, he would sneak into the vault. John laughed unpleasantly, and then I realized John and Buddy wanted to use me. I couldn't believe it. John was my boyfriend. He only shot harmless pranks, not robbing banks. I was in so much pain. I immediately jumped up and ran for the exit, and then the waitress turned a corner. We ran into each other. The tray fell to the floor, and everyone stared at us. My stomach went cold with horror. I looked around. John and Buddy were already on their way to me. Oh my god. I quickly ran out of the cafe. My heart was pounding, but I couldn't stop. John knew I heard everything. At that moment, I was grabbed and a hand clamped over my mouth. I started to kick, but John was so much stronger. He dragged me somewhere. "No, let go!" But he just shoved me into the car. I was shaking. "John, why are you doing this to me?" He laughed. He never gave a damn about me. He just could make good money on such a fool on TikTok. But now he was going to hit a really big jackpot. I looked away to hide my tears. "No, I will not participate in the robbery." Then John grabbed me roughly by the chin and told me that I would be his slave not just today, but for the rest of my life, if I don't want anything to happen to my mom. At that moment, Buddy came. He opened the door and reached for me, a metal collar in his hand. "Let me go, you idiot!" I struggled and screamed, but John held me tight, and Buddy put the collar and the muzzle on me to keep me quiet. Soon we were at the bank. John pushed me out of the car and led me on the leash to the bank. I felt terribly broken, but I thought one thing. I needed to stop them. John took me to the bank and immediately shouted, "Freedom to the animals!" I wanted the ground to swallow me up when everyone looked at us. What a shame. The guard came towards us. Then I saw Buddy at the end of the room, and the chill went through me. "No, I won't be a slave. I'll save the people, and then I'll get my mom out of town right away. John will never find us." I exhaled and made up my mind. "Mom, you'll be proud of me soon." Then I abruptly pulled off the muzzle and shouted that it was a robbery. I hoped that Buddy would be captured immediately, but instead there was a commotion. The guards looked around in confusion. "Come on, catch the robber!" But suddenly they grabbed us and dragged us to the exit. "No, you don't understand. Buddy is the robber. He's there." But the guards wouldn't listen. At that moment, Buddy, who was lurking at the cash register, gave a smug wink. John hissed that I'd messed it up again. No way. I stepped hard on the guard's foot, and he let me go for a second. That was enough. I immediately rushed back. Buddy was already threatening the terrified employee, and she was putting money in his bag. "You will answer for everything." I ran up and jumped on his back. I needed to give time for the employee to call the police. Buddy tried to throw me off, but I held on tight. But suddenly Buddy spun around and I fell to the floor and hit my head. The last thing I heard was the sound of police sirens. I woke up with a terrible headache. I looked around and realized that I was in a hospital room. My God, John was sitting on the next bunk. Looking at me straight, he told me that Buddy was behind bars and that we were considered heroes. Suddenly, John leapt up to me and pinned me against the wall. He hissed at me not to turn him in. I remembered what he said, didn't I? Of course, and threats and blackmail. I was John's plaything from the start, but I had to get stronger to understand that. Instantly, I grabbed a leash and wrapped it around John's arms. He didn't even have time to recover. Security! Over here! I'm not John's doggy anymore, and I won't let somebody push me around. A month later, John was put in jail. He glared at me all through the trial, but I was calm. The fear of John was gone, as was the love. And then, on the city day, I got a bonus for helping the police. My mom was so proud of me. The money was enough for the surgery, and now I was calm. I remembered the story with a smile now. I learned not to be manipulated and to rely only on myself. And once again, I was convinced that honesty is the main thing of wealth. Did you like the video? Subscribe and like it. Support the channel. Thank you.